Like so much, I think, from the church side, and I'm guilty of this too. We want our young people to experience this, right? Even though you hear the same thing like, oh, I didn't know there was so much need. I mean, you're thinking, okay, that's good exposure, right? But we shouldn't be harming people to give exposure to our young people.
What type of tourism do they call that?
Yeah, that's missionary tourism.
Missionary tourism.
Yeah. Welcome back to Jesus versus America. Jesus told us that we couldn't serve two masters. So many of us are trying to serve Jesus while also following the dictates of the American culture. I'm John, and I'm joined by my good friends Monique and Wisdom, and together we represent 3 generations that are trying to faithfully follow Jesus. Our topic today is, can you go on a short-term mission trip without doing harm? Right now, it's estimated that there might be somewhere between 2 million and 4 million people each year who will be on a short-term mission at some point in their life. I look back at the statistics. In 1989, there were 450,000 short-term missionaries. By 1998, there were 1 million. By 2006, there were 2.2 million. And it's unclear if these are just people who are going back repeatedly or there's just an accumulation in the popularity of short-term missions. 30% of those short-term missionaries went to Mexico just because it was convenient. Yeah. Just because it seems like that's where everybody goes. That was where my first short-term mission trip was.
It was also my first short-term mission.
It seems to be the place of like a destination for short-term missionaries. And what stood out to me, not only that that's a high number of all the countries in the world, that 30% go to one country, but the other one is just in missions in general. It's 1 out of every 174,000 Christians goes as a missionary to an unreached people group. So we're going back to the same people, it seems, over and over. But the question we're asking is, can you go on a short-term mission trip without doing harm? Should we just vote? Because I'm going to say, I'm going to sound like a Grinch, but I'm going to say that my answer is probably there's no way to do it. It's close to no. Is my attitude about this. Do you have a different view?
Oh no, I'm on the no boat.
We'll get to you in a moment because you're about to go on another short-term mission trip. Yeah, and you've led several, right? Yeah.
Several. I've been to one recently.
Okay.
And I'm going again.
Yeah. So we're gonna see if we can talk you out of it by the end of the episode.
Okay, sounds good.
The textbook on this, the book that I think everyone should read, and has been around for a while, but it is the book When Helping Hurts. And this was written by 2 people who are really like experts in the field of development, Stephen Corbett and Brian Fikkert. And they wrote this book a while ago, and it's in its 2nd edition. It's the book that everyone should read, even if you are going to go on a short-term mission trip. And I should be clear, I've been on several. In fact, I led 4 of them to Russia. I've been on several when I was in youth ministry much earlier when I was in my college years. So it isn't that I haven't been on them and don't have any experience with them. I thought they were the greatest thing. And the other thing was, I thought I was doing them sustainably. In fact, the 4 trips that I led in the early 2000s into the mid 2000s to Russia, I actually stopped those trips because I thought they were doing harm and wrote a report on what I thought the harm was.
Oh, interesting.
And the local, so we partnered with a local church. It wasn't like we were going on these random trips. We had a partner church, and we would go summer after summer, like as sister churches. We would travel to support that local church. And I thought what we were doing was helping the local church. And I think there was some help. I mean, we weren't doing this, there was no good that came out of it. We were there to support them and to sustain them and to just do whatever that they wanted us to do. We'd come under their leadership. But in the end, I realized we were harming their ministry. We were the presence of Americans in that local area where there were no other Americans was actually causing people to look at the church as if it was a cult. They were looking at the church as if there was something wrong. They actually asked us, the townspeople would say, does that church have to report to you every year? Mm-hmm. And when I heard those things, I thought, we are not doing any good here. And there might be some good, but we're doing far more harm. So I am somebody who's tried to do it. And as I read this book again to remember again these principles, I realized, yes, even when I was trying to do it right, I was violating a lot of these norms and principles, I think. And by the way, the authors are very forthcoming in ways that they did the same thing. This is how they learned some of these things too in some of their efforts. So it's not going to surprise anybody in this episode that I probably think it's really hard to go on a trip without doing any harm. And the question, I guess, is there some good despite the harm, or does that harm mean that we should just stay home and not do this? So I think that's kind of where I'm going to start. I'll throw it over to you and say, you're about to go.
I'm about to go on one.
How do you think about this issue? And what are the particular things that you think about where you think maybe this is some of the guardrails that I might put on to make this experience into something that doesn't really, or at least minimizes what potential harm could come from it and maximize whatever benefit comes from it?
Yeah. So I am a believer that most, if not all, mission trips cause harm. And I've been on short-term mission trips from 2 weeks long to even the shortest, like the 24-hour ones. I have been to those ones even. What do you do in 24 hours?
You build a house. You build a house in 24 hours and then you leave. And I've been to those, and so I've had my fair share of experiences with them. And looking back, I'm saying, like, there is no benefit to them truly that we truly give them there. And if anything, it's busy work for us, and we're better off writing a check to these people for what giving them what they really need. Even building a house, we're taking away work from the people who we can pay to build houses for them there, and whatever. And that's from someone who's going to one in a month.
Yeah. So
what happened? Yeah. So the nature of the trip that I'll be going on, and this is an organization that I have worked with for a couple of years now, is one, the mission isn't conversion. We're going to a nation that is 97% a Christian nation. They should be sending missionaries to the U.S. on faith. The purpose of this this trip isn't conversion. It's not bringing Jesus to these people. That's absolutely not the case here. The Lord has his eyes on these nations, and he is present there with their own people there and in the churches there. There's nothing special spiritually that we are bringing. But why do we go? This organization in particular gives mentorship to children that are in need of mentors, have no parental figures and are in need of that. These mentors are people of that nation. So it creates jobs for people in that community. So what do we do when we go over there? One, we bring money with us to provide for these mentors there. And we, when we go over there, we are helping them put on a camp for the completion of a year of mentorship for these students and children. And so it's not even really us doing any of the work. If anything, we're watching the mentors do their work. And as an organization, we're helping them put on this big camp to celebrate a year of the work that's already completed. So camp will happen with or without us. We go there to, in one sense, just support the mentors and be cheerleaders for them. So there's awards and recognition that we have give to them, as long as the supplies that we're bringing over. We bring over people who are potential donors to have them see this is what's happening here. When we go over there, we like to call this trip not a mission trip. We call it a cultural experience trip. I think it's a privilege for me to get on a plane, take this much time off work, or it even be considered part of my work, and step into a world so different than my own. That being said, it has been profound for my faith to see the Lord work outside of my own culture, outside of my socioeconomic background. And it has challenged me and humbled me and convicted me. And I bring that over here. Does that mean that I can't go down the street where I'm at and feel this, and the same thing can happen? Absolutely not. And I should, and I do. So my situation is a privilege. I don't know if we can even fully call it a mission trip, because it's not necessarily our mission to bring conversion. It's more like a mentorship support of an organization that is creating jobs for the people there. So it's a very unique thing there that doesn't follow the typical bones of what a mission trip is and a Christian one is, and a Christian mission trip is, and I've been a part of those. And I'm very careful to not ever go there again. So this book that you have here, When Helping Hurts, is something that my husband and I have deeply studied, and especially preparing for this trip and kind of watching ourselves and undoing a lot of things that have been built in us growing up in the Christian culture.
For people who aren't familiar with it, I think I can just summarize some of it. I mean, you should read the book. This is one of those books where if you're going on any type of short-term mission trip, whether it's 24 hours, by the way, short-term is defined as anything under 2 years by the authors. It is something that I think should be required reading. But they have this one formula that kind of permeates throughout the book, which is that most often North American Christians see poverty as a deficit of material things, because that's our view, right? And we go into cultures where that's not really first their view. And second, that poverty is a multifaceted thing. And oftentimes it's actually a poverty of relationships, not of material goods. But we come at it from a very material perspective. So what happens is if you define poverty as they don't have anything, so I'll bring something, right? So that's the first part of this formula. And second, most North American Christians think, well, I can go fix that, because that's a big value in our American culture, to go be able to save people or fix things. If I can go fix it, so your house example in 24 hours, like, oh, they don't have homes, I can go build one in 24 hours, solution, right? And then you add to that the feelings that causes, feelings of humiliation, embarrassment, inferiority, shame in the recipients, who are often watching people come in and do something that they can actually do better.
Right.
Especially when you send like a junior high ministry to go build a house. Like, they've got people in there who really know how to build a house, right?
Junior high ministry to build a house is crazy.
My daughter just went on one, and so, I don't know what they're actually going to get to do, right? But what happens is if you add this like North American definition of what they really need is more stuff, because that's our definition of life, you add that we're going to come in and fix it for you, and then you put on there the feelings that causes. Here's the important thing. It causes harm to both parties. It causes harm to those who are going on the trip and those who are the recipients of this, because it reinforces in us this savior complex, this idea that we just have this idea, and we never get to what the authors talk about is fixing relationships with God, with one another, like with nature itself, with the world. Those things are not healed, even with yourself, and realizing the dignity that you have. And nothing robs somebody of dignity than pulling up in a truck and saying, oh, you don't have a house? Well, I'll build you one, and then driving away like they had no participation in that. And so that's the harm that comes. And I think, you can hear it when people come back. They're always talking about what it did for them. Like, this mission trip changed my life. Yeah. I'll never forget the people I met. Like, they helped me more than I helped them. That's probably true. But then it became a trip about you and what you got out of it. And I think that's kind of hard to do, right? So that's part of it.
For the amount of money it costs, too.
Well, that's what I was going to say. To me, it's a mismanagement of funds. It's a mismanagement of resources. It's stewarding things poorly. Like, I have so many questions about the trip you're going on too, because it's like, I know you said, oh, it changes me. And you go there to help run a camp and like applaud the people there, but like, wouldn't that happen if you were there or not?
Totally.
And that's the thing that's hard for me. It's like, oh, you're just going at the end of it for like the yay camp part at the end.
I see what you're saying.
And the money that you spend on an airplane ticket to get there, to just be like, you know what I'm saying?
Sure,
like, to
totally.
me, it just sounds a little bit crazy. And I understand, like, when we're talking investors, I understand
introducing
people,
donors.
That I understand. So, but that also doesn't need a team of like 20 people. If you've got a serious investor who's like, I have $1 million and I'm looking to really make a difference in something that's sustainable and that I believe in, and you want to check out and do your due diligence and see, or even 100, that whatever it is, that I understand. To me, that's almost more like a business trip. Like, I don't think it needs a team of 20 people, and it's not at the camp. It almost feels exploitive to do it. Like, let's go the last day where it's the party, and like, I don't. That's too strong of a word. But this is just the way
But stick with the stewardship. You're actually right about the idea of like what it would cost to send a team of, let's say, 8 to 10 people
to be like, great job, we're cheering you on for 5 days, and I'll never see you again, or see you next year.
Or see you next year. There's relationships built. Let's say they're like, in the trips I took, the relationships were built. They were real. We corresponded with each other. But I really would wonder if, so Steve Corbett has an interesting example in this book where he goes, he attends a rural church, a small rural church.
Yeah.
And he says, suppose a team in Switzerland called me up and said, we're going to send 13 missionaries to your rural church in wherever he lives in Georgia, I think it is.
Insulting, right?
And we're going to send them, or we'll send you $25,000, which is what it would have cost the team to travel from Switzerland to here. And he said, what would my church want? Would they want 13 Swiss people to show up and be hosted for a week or two doing who knows what,
or
building
like an actual resource that can be put, and also like, and not that it's important for us as Christians to have, you know, transnational relationship, but we even have done full episodes on here about how important it is for your Sunday church to be super local in your own community, because it only works when it's your own community and you build those relationships where you can see each other every day. So even to be like, I met this person in this other country and we're still pen pals, like that's great, but also like their people that are going to really support them need to be there with them. Like, you know, like it's still just, to me, it's a matter of resources.
I think if you asked our well-funded church if they'd rather have 13 Swiss people come over or $25,000,
they'd probably still take the cash.
I'll take the $25,000. I could do more ministry locally with $25,000. And I guess what I'm asking is, if that's the case for us, if we would just say, you know what, it would actually be better for my ministry impact for you to send the money than for you to send a tourist team over here from Switzerland. Why do we think other countries differ in that?
Exactly.
Right? Like it seems
and so
strange.
What is the thing that makes us want to go and be there and see it and be in the center of it?
Yeah.
I'll
It's probably that savior
feeling
complex.
good,
Right?
I'll answer this for you on like the nature of this, because we're not going there just to be like, hoorah, like go you. When we go over there, this is the need for this particular group and this organization is, yes, that there are other people can go there and train these mentors, which is part of what we do. We go there to not only cheer the mentors, check on their progress and give workshops and curriculum to help develop the mentors to continue to do their things. Does that mean that they're probably someone for long term, for years?
So that's different, right?
It's
the people
for
from the organization that
These
are going
mentors
there for years, that are staying with them for years.
Yes,
that's what I'm
years.
saying. That's different than I'm going for a week and I'm going to train you and leave. You know,
it's for years. And so what a real need is, because we keep saying like, yeah, there are people, and I'm the one that started that, right? Like there are people that can build the homes and we don't need to do it, and they whatever. I have been there. I'm like, they don't have these people to train these people. They've been looking for it and they're asking, can you please come back? We need help with our mentorship program here.
Right.
We need these resources. We need something, because our mentors are giving, and it's a third world country and they have bills to pay too. And there is no resources for this here. Can you come back and help us to do this? And so something that I reflected on with this organization, I think last year was my second year going. I went, so the year before was my first time, last year was my second time going, and I'm like, this was useless if I did not return again and again and again. And I don't just mean pen pals, but to choose something and dedicate myself to it, even when I'm in my home country, be that funding, be that telling that story, be that having inform how I even do ministry and see God and see the world too. And I have that. And I did say that is a privilege to know how the rest of the world can operate. It's not something that everyone else gets to do, but I do think that with that privilege, it's something that God would want of us, to not just be so inundated with our own culture and our own country. And I'm not saying you can't do that without getting on a plane. I'm saying that's a privilege. However, I think there is fruit to seeing what other things are happening outside of our own world. I don't disagree
with you. I think the question is the amount of time.
Yeah.
It's not like what you're saying I agree with, but how long are you guys going for?
We are going for 2.5 weeks.
So 2.5 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. So, but are you training people in those 2.5 weeks?
For 3 months. No, 3 months prep, 2.5 weeks attending year round, constant communication with their team there.
So they don't have training that's actually present with them for long term.
No.
That's unfortunate.
And that's one of the things. That's one of the things we have to really delve into. Like it's so the authors make this really, another pillar of the book is that we need to know the difference between relief and rehabilitation and long-term development. And so often short-term missions don't have the ability to do anything but relief. And it's usually the wrong thing. Relief has to be for immediate needs. And so that's a whole part of the book that we just can't go into. But you need to know the difference that most short-term mission trips go in to do relief work when really what's needed is either rehabilitation or development.
Right. Totally.
Because it has to be sustainable.
Right. But that year-round contact is part of it. So like you could say, that sounds good. We are actually providing a resource. But one of the things we have to ask is when we're providing the resource from the outside, that is undermining and not causing the development of that resource.
Which is like
internally.
the first thing you learn. I took international development systems. It was part of my major. And that's like literally the first thing you learn.
Yeah, well, when you bring outside assets.
Yes.
When you bring outside assets.
From ground up.
Right.
It has to. There's so much damage. And I'm not even talking about from the Christian perspective about faith. I'm talking about
the North American perspective in general.
Right. And the damage that you do to the development of a people and a place is profound.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for example, there's an example of like how they were going to give loans to an area that was devastated by the tsunami in 2004. And there was a need for relief, but then there was this need for development.
Yeah.
And when they went in there, decided like we could bring microloans from the outside, or we found that there's a bank already there that is trusted in the community that is now devastated because of the tsunami. If we could somehow fund the bank
and let the
so
bank
that the
put
bank could get it out to the community. We've done two things. The community is being helped, but it's a local institution that's being strengthened. Now, I don't know enough about this ministry wisdom to know, like, for example, is there a way to raise like those resources to train so that there's still some help being given to train, but it isn't like, hey, we don't have it. I felt the same way when I go to Russia. We'd ask them like, what could we bring next year that would help your ministry? I'd get it like a shopping list. And I'd be like, okay, this is no, that's not really what I meant, you know?
They're like 5 backpacks, 10.
Yeah.
5, just 5.
One time it was, can you bring a keyboard? You know, like it was we trucked like, and you know,
I remember that. Oh my gosh.
That was an international trek carrying that thing with me.
I remember that.
There's another example in the book where like they talk about a VBS. So many people go to do VBSs in local places. And they said that like that the local population, the local church, when they're trying to do a VBS, kids won't go to it because when the out-of-towners come, they get free stuff and they get all these cool things and it's so fun and it's so neat and it's so cool. And then they leave. And now, like, the rest of the people are like, well, we have a Bible study or we have Sunday thing. And they're like, nah, we don't get anything when you guys do it. And it's not as cool. And you don't have as many toys or whatever it is. And that was one of those things where, like, we've actually undermined the local church by doing that.
Right.
Because they've got to be there year round. Right. To do
like,
those
at
kinds
some
of
point,
things.
their own community needs to start doing their training. And they train, you know, people within their own community or whatever it is, you know, that the need is.
You said something really helpful about it's the time, which is why this episode is about short-term missions.
Missions are so important.
Well, just because Jesus sent us on mission, like we can't say there's like he said go, and he didn't just say go just to your local community, like he sent, right. So I think the idea though is just like, I mean, yes, we could live our life on mission, there's all those kinds of things, right? But I'm not in any way talking about long-term missions. People who commit themselves say, I'm going to go to a place
for a few,
and I'm going to be there for decades, right? That's what I'm going to do. We're not talking about that because I think we can't. I'm just talking about the short-term part, not the mission part, because it does create
distinction.
And it's
that's a great distinction.
It's the time.
Yeah, and what can you do? And then what? Look, if you have a limited time, what can we do? That's the problem. Like if you have a weekend. If you have a weekend to go down into Baja California, you have a weekend, like what could you realistically do that isn't like, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this so that you can come back and felt like you did something.
I've always had such respect for those missionaries who have like taken their entire family and put them into this new world and have stayed there for decades. I'm like, you're a gangster. And they come and they visit the U.S. short term to tell the story.
And they're like, gather funds and go back.
And then they go back. And I'm like, you are a BA. Like that is how it should be done. And I remember when I was I studied abroad in Spain for some time, and there was a missionary there that I got to meet, and I said, how long have you been here? And he said, well, I've been here for 9 years. And I'm like, oh wow, like, you know, and I was younger too, and I'm like, what is your ministry like? Like, you've been here 9 years and the church is dying in Europe, so like, what is your thing? And he began to tell me about how him and 3 guys meet at a bar weekly and read their Bible. 9 years, and it's 3 guys at a bar. And I was like, so it took 9 years to have 3 guys at a bar to read the scripture. And he goes, yes, because culturally it takes about 7 years, 8 years to gain trust to invite someone to your home in this culture, and let alone to church, the church is dying in Europe, let alone to something like that in the home. It's 7 to 8 years of relational rapport.
Wow.
In the US, it's about, I think some statistic says something like 3 to 4 months to build rapport to invite someone to church. And you can't assume that in a weekend, depending on whatever culture you're jumping into, that you're even going to build relational rapport to do anything fruitful like that.
This is in Spain?
This is in Spain.
We supported, and you know who they are. They were in Spain for over a decade.
Yeah.
And I think when they came back, they said it's the hardest soil, right?
Yeah.
Like we probably saw 1 or 2 people like come to Christ during that time in the decade. And they were there, their kids were in school. I mean, they lived in that community.
Yeah.
So we're affirming that, just to be clear.
Yeah, 100%.
We're affirming those things.
100%.
But I think when you truncate the time and you put a limited window on it, it's not just that what could you do in that short time. We as Americans, North Americans especially, we feel like we have to come back with a report. We have to have done something. There has to be a metric. We need to feel like it was justified to raise $25,000, and rightly so. I mean, I remember one of the first mission trips I remember hearing about, and I should say that short-term missions didn't exist that long ago because we didn't have like the ability to just travel in a weekend or for a week or two. I mean, it wasn't until airplanes, became available, and then they were cheap enough that we could all get on an airplane and go to another continent or go even across our own country. So short-term missions really are a recent phenomenon, and you can tell from the statistics I say they keep growing because they're increasingly more available, and we like to travel. So then we just go on these trips. But these are the things that I think are important to remember about these trips, is because we feel like we have the metrics, because we want to do something within a limited window, it actually brings out some of the worst parts of these risks. Like they feel like we got to do it within a certain window. It costs a lot of money to go. We got to raise the money. And we write these letters to all of our friends saying, well, I really want your prayers, but I also want your money. But if I could just get your prayers, but I really need your money to go on these trips. And some of them, it really would be better if we could just raise some of that money and contribute
and fund
and have a relationship, but do it in a way that doesn't undermine the local assets that are there. Do it in a way that is helpful, but that does take you going there, spending time, listening, participating, letting them tell you, and those are the things that are
I'll say
needed.
about the organization that I'm a part of, it's about 6 years, and they're barely just getting their bearings on the retention of these mentors and the training that we've been building for like 6+ years.
So maybe the model will continue to change.
And the truth is they don't have that there right now.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they will never have it. And in Jesus' name, they will have it and develop it.
I think if the goal is to do that, like that should be the goal, right?
And something about this organization is there is a goal that they will never ever need us, and ultimately God has his sovereign hand over them. But the goal is to one day not return, and that these mentors can train more and more and more other mentors beneath them.
And while you're there, your attitude could be, I need to learn from you, right? That's why you guys don't call it a mission trip. But
we call it a cultural experience trip.
So that people can do that. And I think it's important because that lets you listen, that lets you be led by their own ideas.
Right.
And I know this ministry, so I like that it's all led by the people in country. It's all right. It's
they're
all
in
of
charge.
that, right? And they're also doing it all year long. They're not waiting for us to come back to do something.
The once a year thing.
Well, I mean, but they could even do without that if they had to.
I mean, like if it was literally just we did something once a year.
Oh no, they actually operate year round, and not only that, like other programs from this organization. It's amazing.
Yeah, these things I think we're finding out. I think we were all rushing to do them. I mean, I was interested that in 1989 there was that's kind of when it started to mushroom, because that was the first trip that I took to Mexico with a group of junior hires, and I remember that same feeling like we just didn't know. Right. And there's been so many of those things when you come back and you say like, oh, what we did, like, were they able to do that? Could we have helped them to do that? Is there any way? So those are important things to do. I was trying to think of a way to make this positive. Like, what could we do that would help? Like, so much, I think, from the church side, and I'm guilty of this too, we want our young people to experience this, right? Even though you hear the same thing like, oh, I didn't know there was so much need. I mean, you're thinking, okay, that's good exposure, right? But we shouldn't be harming people to give exposure to our young people.
What type of tourism do they call that?
That's missionary tourism.
Missionary tourism.
I mean,
that's just so,
The first one I remember was
you don't get to do that at
a
the
group that went to
expense of people.
Thailand, right? 20 people went to Thailand. They had one translator among the 20 people. So there was no chance they were talking to anybody, right? And so I asked, like, what did you do on the mission trip? And they're like, we went from temple to temple and prayed for the temples. I'm like, I could have done that from here.
Yeah.
Just show me a picture.
Bluetooth prayer.
I could just
from
pray
across
for the
the
temple
globe.
from here. And then they also had suits made. They were riding those like little rickshaw like things. Like, it was missionary tourism. I mean, they were learning about other cultures, but that, to raise as much money as they did for 20 students to go to Thailand to experience that, I thought that is the place where stewardship really like gets to me. But like, we got to turn this a little bit. But that doesn't mean we can't do it at all. So I'm trying to think of a solution. Here's what I've thought of so far. We need to like lease land in some other country, like maybe somewhere in like Guatemala or somewhere like that. We need to lease land and build like a missions amusement park, right?
Oh
and then
my
all of the trips, they would fly in. So they get on the airplane. Yeah. They could fly in. So they all get on the airplane and they leave the country. They could land somewhere
So that
that's
we're
like,
not, are you saying so we don't do damage? So
yeah,
like we
yeah.
actually have
No,
a place for these
it's
people?
cordoned
AI
off.
simulation
It's
of, like,
cordoned
you're
off.
actually helping some
it's,
children.
It's fenced, right? So they go somewhere that's
So they
hot and
can't
humid.
There's photo
Absolutely.
booths with like children on it that you just.
No, they'll be like, they can
No,
build a building,
no.
they can paint a wall, they can do all the things we send kids to do, and then after they leave, we'll just knock it all down so the next group can do the same thing all
Shut
over
up,
again,
John.
right? And then
Shut
we
up,
could have
John.
like people from the locals, like playing all the people in need.
Awful.
Okay, all right, maybe
You're
that's
done.
maybe that's not what we're gonna do.
You're done.
Let's give some helpful tips that come from. I'm just going to cite from When Helping Hurts. These are some tips that would help if we're going to still do this. And I think my view is, like, it should be the rare case that we still do this, would be my view. Maybe I'm the Grinch
Yeah.
on this. But if we still do this, here's some tips they give. Make sure the host organization receiving the team, so the in-country host, understands the basics of poverty alleviation, that this isn't just really a relief trip when it should be much more like into rehabilitation and development. Make sure they know. Confirm that the host organization and the community members that they're serving want a team to come. So often we think like, oh, they'll be so happy when we're there. We might be a burden and actually doing more harm. But even just if we're not doing harm, we might be a burden to be hosting all of these people to come in. And make sure they believe that it would improve the ministry and their lives of the community people. Be open to not sending a team. Like, maybe you prepare and you grab resources, but then ask the question, like, do we really need to go?
Yeah.
Just even asking that question is important. And I thought it was really profound to just say that not only maybe you just do all the other part and then send ahead what you would have done, but in a very thoughtful way, because you don't want to do harm by just bringing outside assets in and devastating what's there. Design the trip to communicate that it's intended for being and learning more than doing, which is what you guys have done. Avoid paternalism. Make sure the work is being primarily done by the community members, not a show to say, look, we've come to do this for you. There is several levels that in this book they print, like, we could do to you. We could do for you, but the ideal is to either do with you or let you do it. Those latter ones are the ones we never think about. We're always like, I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to do it to you against your will. Doing it with you or just having you do it would be the better ones to go. Avoid communicating that the team is going to save the needy. We do that in our marketing and our graphics, like the ways we do it. One of the websites I looked at was suggesting that we just go ahead and build a website of white girls holding dark babies, so we can just get it over with, and then you can just go borrow an image if that's what you want to communicate to all your friends.
Good Lord.
Do not focus on the adventure and the fun the team will have. I've been guilty of this. Like, every one of us has to have a debrief after our missions trip. So, like, we have to go somewhere fun because people won't go on it unless you end up somewhere debriefing in a really exotic location. So tourist attractions, shopping excursions, that shouldn't be part of the mission trip. If you want to debrief, there's plenty of time to do that when you come back. In fact, one of the best examples that they give is have the training start before you go. And this I'm thankful for, that my daughter's experience was they had a whole class on this. They were reading a book like this. Then they went, then they came back and they processed everything as part of the class, trying to debrief what they're doing. So you're plenty of time to do that. Change the name. I like what you guys called it. They recommend a go, learn, return, respond trip. And just there is a myth. They say avoid the trap of believing that short-term missions are the best way to identify those who are committed to long-term missions. There are plenty of long-term missionaries who've never been on a short-term mission trip.
Yeah.
They just went straight from wanting to reach people to actually
Their entire
doing it,
lives are
giving their
reoriented.
lives
Fund
to do
those long-term missionaries. They don't get enough credit, truly. And they are the best, the most selfless of all of us. Yeah.
So there are ways to do it. There are ways that we can do less harm to ourselves, by the way, and to our own souls, and to understand a more holistic understanding of what causes poverty, what missions are all about, the brotherhood and sisterhood of all people, and how of all believers in Christ, all of the people that we could be learning from and helping in our own communities, by the way, as well. So there are ways to do this. Our greatest recommendation would be read this book.
Yeah.
Definitely if you're thinking about doing it, or if you've already gone, it'll help you process some of the things that you've seen, and it'll help you put them in the framework that you want. But our view is this is one of those areas where we can peel apart a little bit of the American tendency to go save people and to think that all poverty is caused by material need, and we'll just bring stuff and we'll save people and we'll do stuff that makes us feel good. But it's actually doing harm to our souls, and it could be harming those, and in many cases, it is harming those that we're trying to reach. So that's what we're trying to highlight in this episode. Yeah. Tell us what you think. You can leave lots of negative comments for what I've said in this show. This is Jesus versus America.
Follow us on all social media platforms at Jesus versus America, and find more resources on our official website, jesusversusamerica.com.